Throughout her 35-year career, she's helped and inspired millions. Please welcome Marianne Williamson.
Thank you. I think we're living in an extraordinary time, not only in the history of the world, but specifically in the history of the United States. We are a generation which must rise up as other generations have risen up before us. Generations that stepped in when there was slavery. Generations that stepped in when there was systematic and systemic oppression of women. Generations which stepped in when there was segregation and institutionalized white supremacy. We as a generation are called on now to step in. I'm not here just to prosecute a case against Donald Trump. I wish to prosecute a case against the political establishment that produced him. I wish to prosecute a case against a political establishment which has been doing this nonsense for 40 years. Donald Trump is a symptom. Donald Trump is an opportunistic infection. It could not have happened. It could not have gotten hold of us had there not been a compromised societal immune system. And that compromised societal immune system was each and every American who has in any way acquiesced to the dismemberment of American democracy over the last 40 years, as trickle-down economics and advocacy for short-term profits for major multinational corporations has come to be more prime, get more care, and get more support from the U.S. government than does advocacy for the health and well-being of the American people, the people of the world, and the planet on which we live. Ladies and gentlemen, if you think our just electing somebody who is the better version of same old, which, by the way, will not beat Donald Trump, then we are actually continuing to conspire with the erosion of our democracy. We repudiated an aristocracy in 1776, and it is time to repudiate it again. As long as the undue influence of money has so corrupted our government that health insurance companies and big pharmaceutical companies and gun manufacturers and chemical companies and fossil fuel companies and defense contractors and every other kind of corporate conglomerate is able to have their way with us, and as long as the best that we can do is to support candidates who will seek to diminish the pain produced by this, but refuse to challenge the underlying forces that make all that pain inevitable, then we, the American people, are conspiring with this nonsense. It is time for a great uprising of the American people. It is time for a moral and psychological and economic and social and political revolution in this country. Today, as we speak, thousands of people are living in terror. A terror due to those deportation raids which represent the most mean-spirited kind of political policy imaginable. Not only that, ladies and gentlemen, but the humanitarian crisis did not begin at our border. The humanitarian crisis began in Honduras, in Guatemala, in El Salvador, and the American government thinks that because you live in Iowa, you don't care. Well, we need to show them that this whole idea of all men are created equal, we mean it. This idea that God gave all men unalienable rights of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, and not just Americans, by the way, we mean it. This idea that governments are established and instituted to secure those rights of happiness and its pursuit, we need to rise up and say, we mean it. And you know that part in the Declaration of Independence where it says that if the government is not doing that job, it is the right of the people to alter it. We need to rise up and say, we mean that too. Because you see, ladies and gentlemen, we have lost our psychological and emotional connection with our own Declaration of Independence. And when you do that, when you let those principles just be written on marble walls somewhere, or written on parchment somewhere behind glass, but they're no longer alive in your heart, no longer alive in your soul, I'll tell you what happens. You become a generation that's easy to play. You become a generation that's easy to fool. You become a generation that is easy to distract. We become a generation that is vulnerable to a political establishment that continually distracts us from the real rot and the real corruption that has taken hold in the sinews of our public policy. When I am President of the United States, we will have a U.S. Department of Peace. We will not just endlessly prepare for war, we will wage peace. We will not just toe the line with short-term profit maximization of defense contractors for whom there is so much money to be made through endless preparation of war. With a $750 billion military budget, but less than $1 billion that we give to peace-building agencies, and I'm president, that's going to change. Because in order to build peace, you expand economic opportunities for women, you expand educational opportunities for children, you reduce violence against women, and you ameliorate unnecessary human suffering wherever possible. We will have a U.S. Department of Children and Youth in order to do more than what the political establishment does now, which is simply to normalize the despair of millions of American children who go to school every single day in classrooms that don't even have adequate school supplies to teach a child to read. And if a child cannot read by the age of 8, the chances of high school graduation are drastically diminished, and the chances of incarceration are drastically increased. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, those children are in Iowa too. Let me tell you, establishment is only talking about the things they find convenient to talk about, because they too have become prey to the corruption by which corporate profits are placed before the health and well-being of the American people. It is time for the American people to wake up and to rise up. First in our minds, and to recognize we might have been fooled before, we don't have to be fooled again. You fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, who am I and what have I become? The American people, we are heirs to a legacy. We stood up to slavery and we stopped it. We stood up to the oppression of women and we stopped it and are stopping it. We stood up to segregation and we stopped it. It is time for us to rise up and to stop the various forms by which a corporatist mindset has had its way with us for 40 years. We need a fundamental pattern disruption. Slavery did not end because the political establishment decided to end it. It ended because the people stepped in with the abolitionist movement. The suppression of women didn't stop because the political establishment decided to stop it. It stopped because with the suffragette movement, the people stepped in. And segregation didn't stop because the political establishment decided to stop it. It stopped because with the civil rights movement, the people stepped in. Ladies and gentlemen, the political status quo is not going to interrupt itself. It is time for the people to step in. And when we do that, of course we're going to repeal that 2018 $2 trillion tax cut that gave 83 cents of every dollar to the richest among us. We will put back in that middle class tax cut. We will finish those college loans. We will give free college and free state universities and colleges. Why? Because this country is supposed to belong to us. That is why we should have universal health care. That is why we have plenty of money. We just need to stop giving it away to a few people who have propagandized us into believing it should all be theirs. No, ladies and gentlemen, we should have an entirely new social contract in this country. Your country serves you, invests you, and what you then do for your country, you become the man or the woman you're capable of being. You become the husband, the wife, the lover, the friend, the citizen, the father, the mother, the teacher, the creator, the producer. You go out and you become great people. We need to unleash the spirit of the American people. We need to uncap the dreams of the American people. Your government should uncap your dreams. Your government should not thwart your dreams. We need an uprising, and to be honest, I think it could start with me. Thank you very, very much.